Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Nikon TV. My name is Chris Ogonek, your host, and we are going to jump right in because we today are talking about the new Nikon Z6III. Now, for the last little while, as I've heard talk and speculation about what this new camera might be, a lot of what I had heard was that people expected it to kind of be a ZF with regular ergonomics, taking the processor, taking some of the autofocus, but not really a huge departure from what the Z6 II was capable of. Well, we're after launch now, and you guys have had time to go through the specs, so I hope you agree with me in the sense that the Z6 III shares way more in terms of capability with the Z8 and Z9 than it does with its previous Z6 II counterpart. It obviously shares quite a bit with the ZF because that's one of the latest models, and I'll probably talk about some of the things that it shares later on if we do have time. But the fact that it shares so much with the Z8 and Z9, really bringing a lot of that technology down into a price point that hasn't seen a lot of that already. Yes, don't get me wrong, the cameras in that price point, whether it's Z6 II, the ZF, or the competitors, are great cameras, but there are things that have not been able to be done at that price point that the Z6 III now kind of kicks the door open and brings a lot of new features to the table. So I'll get into some of those features in a little bit, but obviously it shares the X-Speed 7 processor with the Z8 and Z9. That helps in a huge way to kind of facilitate a lot of the capabilities of the camera. But one of the things that is brand new that also really helps with the capabilities of the camera is the new sensor. Now I say new sensor, it's the same resolution as a ZF and even like the Z6 II at 24.5 megapixels. But there is something different, and it's actually being called a partially stacked sensor. So it's not a fully stacked sensor like the Z8 and Z9. It's not a conventional sensor like the ZF or the Z6 II. So where does it lie, and why are we calling it a partially stacked sensor? So let me just take a minute to kind of tell you what a stacked sensor is, and when I describe it, you're going to be like, oh yeah, of course. So a stacked sensor means that there is a stacked component on the sensor, making it stacked. All right, well, that makes sense. But how do we kind of differentiate between fully stacked and a partially stacked? So Z8, Z9, at every single pixel, they have an additional stacked component. So in that case, the Z8, Z9, it is an additional piece of RAM. So it's DRAM at every single pixel. And because it's at every single pixel, that's what makes it a fully stacked sensor. The partially stacked portion of the Z6 III sensor is called that because we do not have the things in the case of Z8, Z9, the RAM, we don't have a way to speed up the sensor at every single pixel. Therefore, it's not fully stacked. We do have stacked components though, and these are actually found outside of the imaging area, which means that they're not taking up real estate, we're not having to kind of hide them or make more room for them. They're actually outside of it, but they are a stacked component. So you have a stacked component, which makes it stacked, but it's not at every pixel, which means it's not fully stacked, therefore partially stacked. Make sense? I hope so. So what does this partially stacked sensor actually do in terms of giving the capabilities to the new camera? Well, there's a few, and I will kind of delve into them later on as we talk about specific features, but you're gonna get significantly reduced rolling shutter. So rolling shutter is obviously if you're shooting fast action or you're panning. If you're panning, let's say sideways, your straight lines are now diagonal, right? So that's if you're panning. If you're shooting, let's say golf or baseball, that baseball bat is no longer straight. You actually have this weird bend to it because of the slower readout of a conventional sensor when using the electronic shutter. Now you're getting significantly reduced rolling shutter with the Z6 III when using the E shutter. So this now really kind of opens up a lot of possibilities because before at this kind of price point, until you're using a stacked sensor, you kind of have to have ask yourself a question of what am I shooting and how fast is my subject moving? So if it's a very fast moving subject, you would generally go and use a mechanical shutter because this does have a mechanical shutter and an electronic shutter. But if you did not have a fast moving subject and you wanted to be silent, then you would go and use the electronic shutter. That was kind of the kind of if and when that you would kind of pick which course. With the Z6 III though, it really kind of opens you up a lot more because How much faster is this readout speed-wise than a Z6 II? We're talking 3.5 times faster of a sensor readout. So you're getting significantly reduced rolling shutter. In the tests that I've done, is it going to be as good as a Z8, Z9? No, I will tell you, you can, under certain circumstances, go and see a teeny bit of rolling shutter. But I've done the golf swing, I've done the baseball swing, and it is a straight line. So very, very impressed with how this camera deals with fast moving subjects. So significantly reduced rolling shutter. You have much faster readout of the sensor, which means you can do much faster autofocus calculations, which means you'll get better autofocus in general. So that's a great option as well to have. Then, because of the extra readout and the faster processor, you have video capabilities that we've never had before, such as, I'll ruin it for myself, but 6K internal raw recording. That just was not possible with the previous generation of processors and sensors. So you put the two together and this is now what you get. So there's a lot of big benefits that you are going to be getting with this partially stacked sensor. All right, so I've kind of ruined it for myself a little bit. I've talked about autofocus. Let's delve a little bit further into the autofocus of this. And I will say that in terms of what it shares with the Z8 and Z9, it's almost everything. You're getting all the algorithms. You're getting the 9 subject types that you can go and detect automatically one from the other. You have 3D autofocus. You have the wide area custom modes. You have the small, the large, the custom 1, custom 2, make it any size or shape you want. So a lot of the capabilities and algorithms from the Z8 and Z9 are directly transferred right to the Z6III. And I will say that I think a lot of people were surprised with the ZF, how close that camera was to the Z8 and Z9, even though it didn't have a stack sensor. So now that you have a partially stacked sensor, this pushes the capability even further and even closer to what the Z8 and Z9 are capable of. As good as a ZF was, this is a leap forward. So you have better autofocus. What about, let's talk video. So video, I already kind of ruined it. We're talking up to, if we're talking RAW, up to 6K 60p, that's using our NRAW. If you want to go and shoot ProRes RAW, you can do 6K at 24 or 30 frames per second. If you don't want RAW, but you still want extra resolution, you can go and shoot 5.4K up to 60p. You can go and shoot 4K up to 120p if you want slow motion. And then if you want even further slow motion, you can do full HD at 240 frames per second. That's the fastest we've ever had in any of our mirrorless Z products or our DSLRs. So really, really spectacular in terms of the frame rates, in terms of the resolution capability. And again, all of those capabilities, 4K 120, full HD 240, you want to do 4K 60, 5.4K 60, 6K 60p RAW, all of that can be recorded internally without the need of an external recorder. So really, really good benefits on that side of things. It shares a lot of the other features that we introduced with the Z8 and Z9. So we're talking the red record frame, we're talking waveforms, we're talking being able to, if you're shooting multiple cameras and you want to go and sync them all together, so you can go do timecode syncing with UltraSync Blue, the Atomos product. So there's a lot of different ways that this camera is kind of pushing forward, one of them in a way that I don't think a lot of people expected. So not everybody's going to use this feature, and that's okay, but we're just trying to give more capability for more types of users, and that's specifically with the mic jack. Now, every camera basically on the market right now has a mic jack. Why and how are we doing anything differently with it? Well, it's not just a mic jack. If you actually go into the menus, you can actually turn this into a line input. So by turning on that line input menu, this now means that if you're, let's say you're a streamer and you have a mixer and you have multiple pieces of audio going into this mixer, which then goes into a single cable, now into the camera because it's a line out or line in. If you, let's say, churches, a lot of churches will go and have a very, very complex mixing board. Well, if you do want, you can go and plug this directly into the Z6III. So that's really cool. Just ways, we're always kind of trying to push ways that people don't necessarily expect us to do with our cameras, whether it's on the video side or the still side or an autofocus. There's always ways that we're kind of trying to push a little bit forward. So I've talked about the autofocus, I've talked about the partially stacked sensor, I've talked about the video. Now let's go and talk about the EVF in this camera. So with the Z6III, this has a lot of Nikon firsts and world's firsts built into this EVF, really showing how far we're trying to push the tech. So we'll start with the resolution. This is the highest resolution that Nikon has ever had in a mirrorless camera. Up to this point, any of our full frame Z cameras have had 3.6 million dots. The Z6III now has 5.7 million dots. And the great thing is, yes, you can go and turn the refresh rate of the EVF from the 60 hertz up to 120 hertz. There's no drawback to doing that, other than you're going to use a little bit more battery power. You don't have to worry about the EVF dropping in resolution, dropping in anything else. You're going to get the 5.7 million dots across the entire board, no matter what it is you're doing. So that in itself is a welcome thing. I know people have been asking for that. As good as the Z8 and Z9's EVF experience is, there's always people who want that little bit more just to have it. Well, we now have 5.7 million dots of resolution in the Z6III. Well, what else? Okay, let's talk about color. This is the widest color gamut that is now in any mirrorless camera. Most other cameras on the market, you get sRGB compatible color space when you're looking through the EVF. And to be honest, that's great for most uses. But if you're going and shooting in the HEIF format or HLG on the video side, and you want to get kind of that proper color reproduction of what you will expect to see afterwards in the post-processing process, then now with the Z6III, you have DCI-P3 compatible color space with this EVF. So you're getting even wider color reproduction. So better color, better resolution. What else could we do? Well, we're increasing the brightness of the EVF as well and pushing beyond even what the Z8 and Z9 are capable of. Now, why am I kind of using them as a benchmark? Well, because right now they are the benchmark. At the current point, they are the highest brightness, highest nits of any EVF on the market at 3,000 nits. Most other cameras in the Z6III's price point are around 400 to 700 nits. This is now pushing beyond even the Z8, Z9 at 4,000 nits. Now you do have to go into the menu. So this is not natively when you're having it set to auto brightness. It will not jump to that 4,000 nits. You do have to go into the menu, in the setup menu, go EVF brightness, and go manual and bump it up to the highest. So this is only to be used in certain situations where you absolutely need to make sure you see all the shadow detail, the highlight detail, all in one go of really, really high contrast scene, and you'll be able to see it much better than you ever have before. Again, not everybody will use it. Most people will stick with the auto, but for those extreme situations, you now have the highest resolution Nikon's ever done, the brightest viewfinder that have ever been announced, and the widest color gamut that has ever been announced as well. So really, really kind of pushing forward what the EVF experience is like with this camera. Now, I just used the word EVF experience. And yes, you get a better experience with the brightness, with the color, with the resolution. But one thing in particular, when you combine that with the X-Speed 7 processor and with the partially stacked sensor, you get an even better experience. And what I'm talking about is when you're using the electronic shutter and you're shooting in continuous burst mode and continuous high, this is going to give you no blackout between the frames. Now, we've seen this before with the Z8 and Z9. They have no blackout. They're using a higher end technology. They're using our dual stream technology. This does not have dual stream, but because of the faster readout of the sensor, our engineers were still able to go and get a no blackout between shots. So just experience wise, and this is one of those things where it's a little bit more difficult to describe to somebody when you're talking about some of the features, because people want the hype, people want the highest resolution, the brightest viewfinder. But if you are somebody who goes and shoots wildlife, who goes and shoots sports, action, anything where you're tracking and shooting in continuous burst, the experience you get from having no blackout is something, if anybody's shot with the Z8, Z9, it is just such an unbelievable feature to have. You never want to go back once you go to that. So having that at this price point, which no other camera has even come close to at this point, is really, really spectacular. Whew. Okay, so we've talked about a lot already. We've talked about the EVF, the video, the autofocus, the partially stacked sensor. What else is there? Well, there is something else, and it is only right now for the Z6III. It's not necessarily a feature designed just within the body itself. It's actually a way to get your images and to just get more functionality with the camera using an outside wireless source. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about Nikon Imaging Cloud. So Nikon Imaging Cloud does a few things. I'm going to talk about probably 2 or 3 of them just to kind of give you an idea how this is going to benefit us. But I do want to stress, how do you get to Nikon Imaging Cloud? Well, you do it through a mobile, well, through a browser. It can be on your mobile, on your phone, or it can be on your computer as well. From that browser, you now have a number of different new functionalities. What are those new functionalities? Well, right off the bat, I will tell you about, I'll tell you about the wireless transfer images first. I was going to go somewhere else, but I'll tell you about the wireless transfer. So let's say you're out shooting, whether you're doing it for your job, whether you're just out hiking and you're taking some great photos. You get back home, and not everybody wants to go and use a memory card reader, plug it into their computer, go and drag the files manually. Some people just want it to be easier. So that's where Nikon Imaging Cloud is trying to help. So built into the Z6III, and like I mentioned, it is Z6III only that is currently available to utilize Nikon Imaging Cloud. Obviously future cameras I'm sure will all have it, but currently no backwards compatible, no cameras in the past are backwards compatible with it. So you're out shooting all day and you get home and you say, you know what? I just want to charge my battery and I'll worry about uploading the photos later to my hard drive, to my computer, to wherever. Well, now with Nikon Imaging Cloud, you don't have to make that choice. You can still go plug it in, charge the battery, but if you've already connected to Nikon Imaging Cloud in the past, you can go and turn it on the camera and automatically start to transfer. Let's say where you're at home, you have your Wi-Fi network you've already told it to connect to, and your images, whether they're still JPEG or RAW, will automatically start transferring to Nikon Imaging Cloud. All right, so how many photos can I go and transfer to Nikon Imaging Cloud? Because it is stills only. Well, the answer is unlimited. Okay, well, is it unlimited JPEG, unlimited RAW? What do I have to think about here? Well, it is completely unlimited no matter the file format, whether it's JPEG or RAW. The one thing you have to keep in mind though is Nikon Imaging Cloud is not made to be a full-time storage place, right? So this is a temporary storage, some place to just temporarily put your photos and then send them off somewhere else. So you have 30 days of unlimited use, but after that 30 days, it will start deleting images. So why is it only temporary? Well, the reason is it works seamlessly with some of the top cloud services that are out there. So we're talking Google Drive, Google Photos, Dropbox, our own Nikon Imaging Space, Adobe Cloud. So if you have Lightroom Cloud, it works with that as well. And if you do have one of those cloud services, as the images are transferred from your Z6III to our Nikon Imaging Cloud, if you have it set up, they will automatically start transferring to the cloud service of your choice. So let's say you go out shooting, you come home, you plug your camera in, because it obviously will take a lot of battery power if you just don't have it plugged in. Plug the camera in, have it set to start transferring images, and when you wake up in the morning, you can go and turn on your computer. You have your Adobe Lightroom Cloud, open your Lightroom, boom, all your images are already there. So that's one big benefit, is the easier upload of images directly from the camera to the cloud service of your choice. So that's option one for how you can better utilize Nikon Image Cloud with your Z6III. The second is for firmware. Now, how do you go and update your phone? Well, your phone tells you, hey, just so you know, you have a firmware update, and when you plug in your phone at night, it will automatically update itself, and when you wake up in the morning, it'll all be done. Currently, with the, let's say, Z8, Z9, and even Z6III, you can go and utilize this as well, we have SnapBridge. Our SnapBridge app will go and tell you, hey, by the way, you have new firmware. Would you like to go and download it? You click yes, it'll download it to the memory card in the camera, and then you can go through the normal function of going into the setup menu, updating the firmware, and doing it the normal way. Well, there is now a new over-the-air firmware update where you don't even need a memory card in the camera if you are connected to Nikon Imaging Cloud. So again, just like your phone, you have it plugged in at night, you have it set up for automatic firmware download, and if there is a new firmware, it will automatically do it. You wake up in the morning, your camera's all updated. So these are just ways to kind of make the camera easier to use, make sure you're always ready, make sure your images are always ready. But there's a third way that Nikon Imaging Cloud is going to be used, and that's what we're calling picture recipes. Now, I'm going to talk about the picture recipe, and then I'm going to talk about the thing that I'm actually really excited about. So picture recipes are a combination of things. So think of it this way. You see an image and you say, wow, I love the way they changed the color. I loved the way that they blurred the photo. I love the overall look of the photo. How do I achieve that myself? Well, first, you need to be able to see that image to be able to have that experience. So the first thing you get with a picture recipe is you see an example of the photo. The next thing is, I mentioned blurring the photo. So like maybe the person who shot that used a slow shutter speed and a lower ISO, and you may not know how to do that yourself, but you want to be able to kind of slowly learn by looking at other images. Well, the second aspect of a picture recipe is you see a lot of the metadata, whether it was the autofocus type, whether it was the shutter speed, aperture, ISO, a lot of the metadata is built in there, and you get to see all of that so you have a better idea of what the photographer did when they shot it. Okay, so you see the image, you see how the photographer set up using the I'll call them the ingredients, the shutter speed, aperture, ISO, but what else? Well, I'd mentioned color. I'd mentioned how the photographer edited the photo with color. Well, the third aspect is I'll call it a custom picture control. So you get a custom picture control, you get the settings from the photo, and you get an example of the photo itself. So that includes, in a package, what you get with a photo recipe. Now there's going to be dozens of these available at launch for the Z6III. We have some curated ones from some of the Nikon creators. We have some dedicated that Nikon have created as well, and they'll all be available to download from the Nikon Imaging Cloud to your Z6III, and then have them be new picture controls within your camera. So if you really love the grading that was done with a particular file, sure, you may not even care about the settings itself. You just want the look of that photo. Well, you can download that to your camera and utilize it yourself. Okay, so that's great. A lot of people will go and use that. What am I excited about? Well, I'm excited because now using NX Studio, we're now able to open up a RAW photo, go to the picture control option, and go all the way down to what's a new option here, which is flexible color. So by clicking that flexible color, you can now go and create your own custom picture control. Now, you might be thinking, Chris, we could do this in the past. We had an entire app designed for that. It was picture control utility, and you could go and upload or open a photo. You could change brightness, saturation, the contrast, sharpening. You could use a custom curve if you wanted. And yes, you can do all of that in NX Studio now as well. Okay, so what else is new? Why am I making a big deal about this? Well, now you have the color grading and the color blending option that you can go and utilize directly within NX Studio. So all of those kind of custom looks that you're getting from the curated picture recipes online, well, you can go and create your own. Now, For anybody of a video mind, you might be thinking, whoa, wait a second. So I'm now getting color wheels that I can go and grade my own photos, and I can save that to my Z6 III? And the answer is yes. So if you are of a video mind, you are now able to essentially create your own kind of LUT, if you want to think of it that way, and then upload it to your Z6 III and use it that way. Can this be used for a Z8, a Z9, a ZF, any of the other Z6 II, Z6 even? The answer is no. Currently, right now, this is a Z6 III feature only. I don't know what the future holds. Don't ask. If you do, throw it in the comments below. If that's something you would want, I'm curious to hear that. But for right now, my understanding is it will be a Z6 III feature only. But moving forward, obviously any camera will go and get that flexible picture control option as well. And I'm really excited because that is going to be something that I definitely want. And I know there's a couple guys on my team that have been asking for this for years. Being able to kind of color grade, change your color wheels, and have a lot more control than what picture control utility offered in the past. Okay, so is everybody still with me? I hope so. We went through a lot here today. I tried to pick on some features that may not have been talked about in other channels or with the launch of the product just as much. I wanted to dive down, do a little bit more of a deeper dive. But before we go, I quickly want to touch on a few of the things that the Z6 III shares with other cameras and a few things that it doesn't, because I know people will ask. So, few things in particular. What does it share with the Z8, Z9? So I've talked about the autofocus capabilities. One of the things it does not share with the Z8 and Z9 in terms of autofocus is the dedicated bird mode. Something it does share with them, though, is when it comes to the drive mode. So I haven't actually talked about that. So I talked about the amazing autofocus. Well, that's great, but you need to be able to shoot fast if you're shooting fast subjects. So you can go and shoot with the mechanical shutter, 14 frames per second. If you go and jump into the electronic shutter, just like the Z8 and Z9, you can go and shoot at 20 frames per second, JPEG or RAW. Then, if you want JPEG only, same as with the Z8 and Z9, you can go and shoot in the C30, C60, or C120 modes. Obviously, your resolution drops. I won't bore you guys with those details, but you can still shoot C30, C60, and C120 modes. And with those modes, something else that it shares with the Z8 and Z9 is the pre-release capture option. So you can go and tell it how far before and how far after to shoot, so that if you miss the bird flying off the branch by a split second, well, the camera's already been buffering and it's already been shooting. Now, keep in mind, this is only in the C30, C60, and C120 modes, so it is JPEG only. What else does it share? So let's talk about what it shares and doesn't with the Z8 and Z9. With the ZF, what does it share? Well, it shares a lot of the new features that camera brought in. So we're talking pixel shift shooting, up to 96 megapixels of a single combined photo from the normal 24 megapixels. We have the same autofocus low light detection limits. So that's -10 for the ZF. It's -10 for the Z6 III. And we have the new VR, I'll call it the AF being locked to the VR being locked to the AF points location. So no matter where you put the autofocus point within the frame, that is where the VR system will try and be the most effective. One last thing that it does not share with the Z8 and Z9 is auto capture. It does not have auto capture, but it shares all the drive modes, all the autofocus algorithms, all of the things that people have kind of fallen over themselves in love with the Z8 and Z9 over the last number of years is pretty much in this Z6 III in a smaller and lighter package. So you're really kind of getting the best of both worlds. All right, so what I want you guys in the comments down below is to ask any questions you might have about this camera. Did I not go into too much detail about something that you were curious about? Throw it in the comments below. I'll go and make sure that you get answered. But I also want you to tell me in the comments, what are you most interested in? What kind of grabs you the most about the Z6 III? What makes you say, wow, I really didn't think that they would push in this way? Go and tell me down in the comments below. But that's pretty much it. I think I've droned on long enough. Hopefully you're all with me. Hopefully you're still entertained. And until the next episode, I'll see you then.